There is no doubt if you are seeking out a sales career yourself and or you're already an SDR, already in tech sales, trying to progress your career, you probably chose this career path because you want to make a ton of money. Today, if you give me about 30 minutes, I'm actually going to break down what it takes to go from an entry-level SDR making roughly 75 to 100K a year to a 300K plus per year enterprise account executive, strategic account executive, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I've not only done this myself, I switched from an engineering career to tech sales when I was 28 years old. In under 4 years, I went from SDR to enterprise account executive, but also now through this growing YouTube channel, through our community at higher levels, I have worked with thousands of reps across the industry in tech sales, in software, in B2B sales. And these are the common things that I wish I knew when I first started as an SDR that would have helped me achieve that even sooner. And also, I think equally importantly, would have made me understand the things I should focus on so I would not have to worry about all the fluff, all the noise, all the distractions that come with a sales career. As we get into it, I just want to mention this is truly the video I wish I had when I broke in when I was 28, because when I went from SDR to enterprise account executive, it was kind of this mystery box. I didn't know, I would hear someone's opinion at a happy hour of what they thought I should do. And then all of a sudden, somebody at my company leaves to go to another job, and then they were doing great for 6 months, then they fail. It's just like there's so many things that are unclear. That's really why I wanted to organize my thoughts and break this down, because going into this slide, the most common progression I see from people that ultimately don't make it to that point is year 1 and 2, you're financially motivated, you're excited to be in this career, over-attaining on quota, earning that promotion from SDR to account executive is extremely motivating. From a career perspective, it is oftentimes the largest jump you'll make in salary. Many SDRs I work with go from about 75 to 85K a year, then get promoted to account executive anywhere from 140 to 160K per year. You are effectively doubling your salary, and also the lifestyle change from 80 to 160 is significantly different, in my opinion, than a jump from 160 to 250 even. Don't get me wrong, these are very first world problems, but at the same time, all of that aside, you are here because you want to make money and break into sales. And one of the things I see is everybody posts about their success online. Everybody talks about how they did it. And a lot of people that come into this with a really good head on their shoulders, they're really excited. They want to work hard. They bust their ass in year 1 and 2, which I absolutely recommend. You're willing to do what it takes. You get to account executive. And all of a sudden in year 3 or 4, that really great momentum you had from SDR to account executive just slows down a little bit. You probably went from SDR to account executive in maybe a year's time frame, maybe a year and a half. Now all of a sudden, you've been an account executive, you're over exceeding quota, but you've been in this role as an SMB account executive for 2 years, and you still don't see a way to get promoted to the next tier. That's where I see a lot of people not only lose momentum, but make a lot of career mistakes, whether it's job hopping or conversely, staying in a situation that they should have left a long time ago. Additionally, a really big problem I see with a lot of reps that get into this is you crush it as an SDR, you're grinding it out as an account executive, selling to small businesses. And as you go up to bigger and bigger businesses, while you've done really well at SMB, you fail to adjust and even understand the skills you need to move to a mid-market and especially enterprise account executive role. And I'm going to, again, break that down in extreme detail today. And it's something I wish I had as a rep when I first broke in. And then the worst case of all is you work really hard, and or maybe you didn't even try in the first place, because I think a lot of people get into this, naively think they can show up for 6 to 8 hours a day and like crush it and make 300K. You never had proper expectations when you started. And then by the time you get to year 3 or 4, you just convince yourself it's not worth it when you were right on the cusp of just sticking it out for another 6 months and getting another life-changing promotion going from 150K a year to 250 plus. Everyone starts the same way. You want to make money and move up fast. You want more freedom. Again, obviously you need to perform. I'm not here to blindly say, oh yeah, just join sales and it's easy. But you also, and I say this from someone who spent 3 years as an engineer and hated pretty much every day of it, you have a lot more opportunity if you perform in sales to drastically promote, increase your financial earnings, but also the types of companies you work for and work with in your day-to-day work. You have to perform, you have to get out there and get after it. But for the right kind of person, there is so much upward mobility and financial upside that is why many people start this with great enthusiasm. But again, many people stall before hitting their full potential. Outlining this again in more detail, I think a lot of reps plateau for these reasons below. And also, again, I'm making this video because if you are in this situation, it's not to say, oh, it's time to go. No, I'm hoping to create awareness around this if you're getting to this point, so we can then course correct and get back on track to getting to that 300K plus role. I would say one of the most common things at the entry level is people get into this. They have 3 bad months. They're the worst one in their start group and they worry, oh, it's not for me. And while, yeah, I mean, for 6 to 9 to 12 months, if you are consistently at the bottom of your team, maybe it is time to try something else or go to grad school. However, I think a ton of people often get so caught up in like, they're just not used to being in a career where they lose more than they win. One of the things that is really difficult for people that are first time in sales, learning this career path, learning what it's like to be in a sales role, is you can get the absolute shit kicked out of you for 7 hours a day. And if you have 1 hour where you set 3 meetings, you are like, that is an incredible day. And a lot of people are not either ready for that when they first join the career, or quite frankly, don't have the temperament to handle that on a sustained basis over a significant amount of time. That being said, I've seen a lot of people that really felt that way. And with a simple reframe, with digesting content like this, with getting around a mentor at their company that has been there and done that and is really credible and has really done well, I've seen people who really had themselves marked as down and out get in a better situation, get around the right people, and very quickly change their attitude and performance. Another one, as you get 6 to 12 months, maybe you even are performing, but you're trying to get to that promotion and now you're plateauing because no one's giving you a chance as an account executive, is you've really built your entire identity around activity. Being willing to work 12 hours a day, being willing to do whatever it takes. Yeah, I'm going to work Saturday morning. I'm going to do all these different things. And that's great. And sometimes, especially early in your career, I think that's beneficial and gives you a really big head start and leg up against your peers and competition. However, if that's your entire identity, I'm willing to make 200 calls a day, I've done XYZ, and you can't speak about anything strategic or how you've planned your territory or how you've gotten smarter over time, it doesn't really make you that attractive at the end of the day, because companies can always go find, especially right now, an eager 20 something who either is graduating high school, graduating college, that is willing to do that as well. So people oftentimes over index on look at what I'm willing to do and don't put enough time and thought into how do I build systems over time. Another one specific to SMBAEs, if you're in that boat or trying to promote to account executive, currently an account executive, selling in the SMB, and I say this myself, is something that I really enjoyed. And oftentimes you are rewarded for your activity. You are still dealing with hundreds to thousands of accounts, and at any given time, 50 plus active deals if you have a really full pipeline. That being said, as you go to mid-market and enterprise account executive, those same skill sets are not rewarded. You are not necessarily rewarded because you can respond to an email in under 10 minutes. You are not necessarily rewarded because you are doing full cycle activity, being basically an SDR and account executive at the same time. As you go up to mid-market and enterprise account executive, not only are the deals more complex and require more strategic thought, more strategic planning, but also when it comes to your actual performance, yes, there's an element of SMB account executive where it is about quota attainment. It is what you close, but even more so at the mid-market and enterprise level, it is truly about what kind of business you create and close. And that's pretty much it. The SMB level, maybe you have some other expectations or incentives around pipeline creation, building your own pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. As you get to those upper levels, it's really a different game, both internally, how you're evaluated, and also how you lead a deal cycle end to end. And again, I'm making this video because we're going to break down those skill sets and make it easy for you to understand by the end of this video. And then the most common too at every level, especially SDR and SMB account executive, is I just see a lot of people, again, they're willing to run through a wall, and that's great, but it really is not going to last more than 2 or 3 years at most. And you really burn out before your skills compound because you didn't over time sharpen the knife, get smarter, focus on the right things as opposed to just being willing to do anything and everything. And the biggest one, and I've got an entire section here in this presentation about it, is job hopping too frequently and or right before promotion. I can't tell you how many SDRs in particular that I work with that do really well. They've hit 150% of their quota for 6 months. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, because they've been number one for 6 months, they think they're God's gift to earth and they're irreplaceable. And while, don't get me wrong, the company's going to be sad to see you go, especially right now. If you're working at a market leader and you're number one on their leaderboard, if you jump somewhere else, you're basically resetting the clock on your promotion timer. That other company, while sad for maybe a day, is going to find thousands of eager applicants knocking on their door to take your spot. So it's one of many things I'll get into, but this really hopefully paints the picture of the most common reasons why reps plateau. And I want to contrast that with what the top 10% of reps do differently. And I just want to add, by the way, that so much of this is to give you a framework, but you have to experience. Nobody has this all figured out on day one. Nobody has this figured out by reading another book or watching 10,000 hours of video. A lot of people combine the theory that I'm showing here with immediate action in their day job, real world experience, real world feedback, and they iterate from there. But first and foremost, especially as you get into tech sales, and I think the SDR position is a crash course in this, so many top 10% reps learn so quickly in their career to detach from the outcome. I was a goalie in college. I played for Team USA in the sport of team handball. As a goalie, team handball, it's a very popular sport in other parts of the world, but I did a great job in goal if I saved 30% of shots. So that means every 10 shots, I'm getting scored on 7 times, and I'm doing a great job if that's the case. That is a very weird thing for the average person to get used to, especially when it comes to something like cold calling. You may have to make 100 dials to get 5 people to pick up the phone in the first place. 2 of them are going to tell you to F off and hang up. 2 of them are going to take a call and then say, oh, just send me an email. And one of those 100 people that you dial is actually going to agree to a meeting. That is not something we are taught in school. That is not something that the average person even knows, even if they want to pursue sales. It takes some time to get used to, but at the end of the day, you learn to perform and not even worry about the outcome. You cannot be desperate for something to happen, and you really have to focus and learn over time better systems, better approaches to your job to detach from the outcome and focus on executing. Another thing I see a lot of people miss on, and also again, of course, the top 10% are actually doing this, is actually tracking their performance to understand why they win or lose. Tracking does not guarantee that you will win, but if you are actually being methodical and tracking, as an example, your email open rates, your reply rates, how often people are picking up the phone, how often when people pick up the phone, you're able to book a meeting. When you start to understand this, it's not only easier to iterate and diagnose what's going wrong, but you can also more predictably win. I would argue, especially if you're early on in your career, an SDR or SMB account executive, it's not just about, oh, find a mentor. Actually seeking out mentorship from the right people, the top 10% of performers, the people that have a track record of doing what you do at an exceptionally high level, and or they've done it in the past and are now in a different position. I cannot stress this enough, and I'll get into this more in this video, but finding the right mentor, having the right one correct and awesome mentor who is actually a verified top 10% performer, in my opinion, is better than having 5 average performers be your quote unquote mentors because they have more tenure than you. Over time as well, the top 10% of reps learn to build leverage through skill, not time. So again, I've talked a lot about brute forcing. Over time, you've got to get smarter. You've got to iterate. You've got to find ways to get the same result with the less amount of work, not so you can even chill on a beach, but so you can actually get the same result prospecting that you did with half the time and focus more of that energy on closing $100,000, $500,000, $1 million deals to actually make more money. And more broadly on this last point of understanding how to put yourself in a position to succeed, so many reps do some of these things well, but especially when it comes to promoting from an account executive to an enterprise account executive, a lot of people, it's just an unfortunate reality. And I don't even say this maliciously, but you have to learn to play the game. You have to learn how to position yourself to be in a position to actually succeed, whether that's, working for the right manager, making sure your manager gets recognition, even though you had a great win that you largely drove 95% of the way yourself, et cetera, et cetera. The way I broke this down today is 3 major stages of career growth. What I would call your foundation, where you're earning 75K to 120K. This could be as an SDR, enterprise SDR, or just as your first account executive role as an SMB account executive. Again, lots of activity, lots of brute forcing your way. And that's great, especially early on. You're excited. Not only is over attaining quota motivating to you, but the ability to get promoted to account executive, you're stoked. You double your salary in 2 years. And again, that financial growth is just a sustaining motivator. The idea that you would even be bored in this job never really crosses your mind. But as we get to that next phase of the execution phase, what I would say is usually year 3 to 4, maybe 5, you start to learn full cycle sales. You execute consistently at a high level for SMB. And then ultimately, the people that succeed learn what I would call the quote unquote game that I wish I knew when I broke in at 28 years old. Not only just learning the game of selling to customers, running sales cycles at a very high level, but also internal politics. And again, we'll break that down in more detail. And as we look at the mastery portion of this, I would say maybe 20% ultimately get here that start tech sales, that really work hard and have proper expectations, understand that it takes 3 to 5 years minimum to get to this kind of level. You've demonstrated now success at multiple levels sales, not only as an SDR, but also an SMB account executive. You learn and execute on not just everything, but the most important activities. You know what is worth your time. You're even willing now to talk to prospects and say, hey, I don't think this is a fit right now. Let's reconnect in 3 months and see if it's better then. Just one example of many. But also, and I think most importantly, you detach from needing to do everything. This is really hard for me sometimes. And you leverage your time and learn to, what I would say is, quarterback a deal. For those of you that live in America, you know what a quarterback is. If you're not familiar, you're from overseas. A quarterback is the person that basically does everything on offense in football. So you either pass it, you hand it off, you typically call the plays or audible. Like, you need to learn how to leverage an entire team of your sales engineers, your customer support team, your account managers, bringing in your executives at the right time for enterprise deals. These are the things you need to be aware of as you get to that 3 to 5+ year mark if you really want to be in that 200K, 300K plus earning territory. So taking a look at this foundation layer, for those of you that are breaking in or maybe 0 to 2 years into your career, I just want to reiterate some of the skills that make you very successful at this stage that will in some ways help you at the next stage, but some of which you need to be aware of so you don't over-index on them and make that your entire identity. Certainly strong activity. I've talked a lot about that. We don't need to reinforce that at this point, but when you start at this foundation level, you need to plan to work your ass off. Not because you're going to do that forever, but one, you're going to learn a ton. And the most you're going to learn, in my opinion, is really year 0 to 3-ish. But two, you will set yourself apart against your peers. And also, what I don't think enough people talk about is if you actually really grind it out in years 0 to 2, you actually learn a lot more of what is actually moving the needle. You can't read your book and then understand, oh, I should do this thing. Like, look, sales resources, videos like this, books, trainings, LinkedIn posts, whatever, they can help you get in the ballpark, but ultimately you really have to get out there, understand what works for you, understand what moves the needle. And I just see a lot of people that aren't willing to even put in enough work to understand that. And they've kind of just gotten by like vibing their way the whole time throughout their entire career. And again, on top of that, one thing I would say is if you start to perform, when you start to perform, you should absolutely be seeking out guidance from top performers only. In certain opportunities, in a separate video, comment below if you have questions, take on extra work for them, support top performers, make sure you get on their radar. There's a right and a wrong way to do this, but that's something I see a lot of people sleep on, where they hit 100% of their number, they think things are great, but they haven't put any time or anything else into trying to network or even build a brand that makes them look good and stand out come promotion time. When you're thinking about not only optimizing your workflow to become a top performer, but the things you should think about when you're trying to promote, in my mind, this is a simple overview of the metrics and the things that really matter. If you can track your inputs and outcomes, that will make you an extremely effective SDR, but also help you if you become a full cycle account executive, prospect, and get the same result in about half the amount of time. When I first started as an SDR, I spent 8 to 10 hours a day prospecting. I loved it. But then I got to a point when I became a full cycle account executive where I didn't even have support from an SDR, and I had to be my own full-time SDR and full-time account executive. And when that happened, I actually started to realize I had systematized my work and could get the same result with about half the amount of time, only spending about 3 to 4 hours a day on it. But that's because, as one example of many, I knew that if I made 100 calls at a 5% pickup rate and a 20% set rate, that means I had to make 100 calls to have 5 people pick up. And on average, of those 5 people that picked up, I could set a meeting with one of them. That becomes a revenue engine or a system that is very predictable. Now I'm working backwards and not just trying anything and everything. Now I know what it takes to consistently set meetings and build pipeline. And now it just becomes a matter of executing on those statistics. Further iterating on that, and I have many examples on this channel, you have to know how to break the job into its smallest parts to know not only what moves the needle, not only know how to iterate successfully and try things. One of the common symptoms I see of people who plateau here is they never really understand, like, they try anything and everything. They watch this video, they see a LinkedIn post, they read a book, and week over week, they're not just tweaking like one thing on an email or changing one line of their cold call script. They're trying something different entirely. You will never learn if you don't have any type of control or baseline. And also, when you break the job into its smallest parts and understand what that means, also, come time for promotion to account executive, that is something that management is looking for. Can you truly detail how you became successful as an SDR? Can you break down for me into small, digestible chunks the things that you were doing consistently why they worked, why they moved the needle. And that also is telling me why you would be a good account executive, because you can learn how to break that role into its smallest parts. And I would just say, I know I made a comment earlier about internal politics that definitely comes into play. But first and foremost, if you don't have results, don't worry about politics. If you're hitting 60% of your number, you're not going to be able to schmooze your way to becoming an account executive. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as you transition to account executive, the outcome should be the leading factor, and then everything else will follow. Also, during this time, 0 to 2 years in your career, you are learning the core purpose of B2B tech sales. You learn your problem space and product extremely deeply so you can have intelligent conversations with technical personas. And also, along this way, you can extrapolate technical problems to actual business outcomes. And I'm not telling you here to just learn your product so you can have a smart conversation with an engineer and look good on your call recordings. You need to be able to understand when you talk to an engineer that says, hey, our database is crashing every 3 days, to actually have a meaningful conversation and uncover the impact to them, to the business, to their customers, and really understand at an extremely deep level the broader impact to the business. This in turn will lead to greater opportunities, whether it's a direct promotion, or one of the things you'll see as you're an SDR that's on the cusp of a promotion is more senior personas are more willing to give you high value prospects, or they're even willing to let you run a first round discovery call because they've seen your recordings, they know you're on the ball, they know you know your stuff. And in my mind, again, some people have gotten a promotion without that. But to me, just make that assumption that you need to learn your space at that detail, and a lot of other things will take care of themselves. And again, also, as you get to account executive, you understand some common pitfalls, like what it sounds like to feature dump. Or as an example, a prospect tells you one thing like, yeah, our database went down, and you immediately go into pitch slapping them with everything about your product. You have shown some of these skills by the end of year 1, by the end of year 2, and it shows me you're ready to promote to the next level. So the execution phase, you're an account executive now. You're trying to go from account executive to mid-market account executive, or mid-market to enterprise account executive. Closed business is now your metric. This is oftentimes, for those of you that are working really hard, an adjustment that's easy enough to figure out, especially at the SMB level. But your activity, your willingness to run through a wall, your willingness to work 12 hours a day can help, but it is not going to help you as much as it did when you were an SDR. Because if you don't close the deal at the end of the day, hey, it's cool that you got 2 meetings today, but I need some business closed yesterday. This is where I see a lot of reps start to really struggle and lose momentum. And conversely, I see some that just continue to excel because they're around the right people, they seek out the right mentorship, and they understand that you can't just activity your way to a closed deal. Outcomes, again, here trump everything else. But again, I just want to reiterate, a lot of people that build that identity on, I'm going to activity my way to, I'm just going to work hard, I know it'll happen. That really can happen much more easily at the SDR level. And you will find out here when you go from SDR to account executive, how systematized or not your work is. If you are at a big company, maybe you were in a hot market, you got a quick promotion, you're working at a market leader, and then you go to a smaller company or the economy slows down, that is where you really find out how effective you are as an SDR or account executive. Because if you don't know the right questions to ask, if you don't uncover a lot of pain, if you have built your entire identity on being the best cold caller and you've optimized for a 3-minute conversation, and now when you're leading 30-minute discovery calls, you don't really know what to do, that's where I see a lot of people plateau. And by the way, some growing pains there are totally normal. It's not like you're going to have it figured out right away, but a lot of people get there and they just freak out. And all of a sudden it's been 6 months. They haven't closed any business. Now they're telling themselves, they're like, this career isn't for me. Maybe I messed up. And in reality, they probably just haven't ridden it out for 3 to 6 months. They're listening to too much advice or none at all. Hopefully videos like this get you going in the right direction. The interesting thing I often see as well, for those of you that are new account executives, again, you're 2 years or so in, is you go from SDR to account executive and you really make discovery like this mystery box, this thing that you have to figure out. And oftentimes, in my opinion, and from what I've seen with thousands of reps in our community at higher levels, is if you are a top performing SDR, learning a thorough discovery playbook, actually setting up really effective discovery calls should not be that difficult, especially if you promote within the same company. Now, again, there's definitely some learning pains. You got to go from like leading a 3 to 5 minute cold call to now leading a 30-minute conversation. Again, seek out top performers, seek out frameworks from people that you respect and that actually lead to results. But I say that because a lot of people spend their first 3 to 6 months like rewatching discovery calls, Oh man, I wish I asked this question. And you're over indexing on something that yes is something you can continually improve. Yes, there's always going to be questions you wish you could ask, but where I see a lot of people fail is they actually don't put enough time on understanding and trying to build out an entire like sales and deal framework end to end. So forget the discovery call. What happens after that? How do you go into a trial? How do you set up a trial? How do you actually get to their leadership team? How do you get your contracts and legal and all of that signed in parallel? And I just see a lot of people that are in that year 2 to 4 space still trying to figure out discovery call, still blaming all their problems on not doing proper discovery. When in reality, if you actually spent more time thinking through and learning how to progress a deal and get the right prospects at the right time in the right places, et cetera, that's where you'd actually have a lot more success. But on the flip side, those that actually learn how to, one, understand what it's like to start over. Like you got to learn some new things for sure. There's going to be a 3 to 6 month period where you're adjusting, you're growing as an individual. But the skills I want to see by the time you get to the end of this period of that 120K to 200K ish salary band is you have learned to qualify deals in and out. You are not just taking any and every call that comes your way. Again, more often than not, I would encourage you to at least have a discovery call, but you've started to identify by learning sometimes the hard way what is real and what's not. You also understand the need to multi-thread into an account. And whereas the first 6 months you were an account executive, you were so excited to potentially close business. When someone asks you for a trial, you're like, oh, that's great. We're moving, we're cooking. And then you start to realize that actually maybe someone who just wants a trial just wants to play with your tool and has no ability to actually purchase this product or has no understanding of what this product even means to the business. You start to implement better systems. You start to have better boundaries with customers. And of course, like give a customer a trial, but if they're not willing to bring the decision maker to a prep call or to a scoping call, it really calls into question if you should even be going into a trial anyway. One example of many. And this is another one, again, where I see a lot of people, the SMB, you can kind of get away with it because oftentimes you have access to leaders. One of the things I took for granted when I was an SMB account executive is I would have a really great discovery call with an engineer with like 100-person company, and call number 2, the CTO's coming. And then as I got to mid-market and enterprise account executive deals, I took for granted that in the SMB space, if we had a good call, it was such a small company that the CTO was ready and willing to join the next call because it was immediately impactful and valuable to them. One of the most difficult things to do is not only to learn how to multi-thread, how to use your champion to sell on your behalf and or introduce you to other people, but also one of the things that's really difficult if you're selling a very technical product is having the ability and depth as a rep to not only validate the technical challenge and the business outcome like we've talked about, but then with all of your conversations, be able to level set and have the proper conversation with the proper person at the right time. And what I mean is even with a CTO, maybe you're a really good rep. You understand your product. You understand the technical ins and outs, but you go to the CTO and you talk to them for 45 minutes about some like syntax error they had with their code. And even though the CTO is super technical, they're like, listen, man, I'm managing a $40 million tech budget. I just need to know how a year from now, I'm going to be happy I purchased this program. One example of many, but again, these are the types of skills I see a lot of reps, the average person that plateaus, they get 3 to 4 years in, they're burning out because they've kind of stalled. They're just consistently hitting 70 to 80% of their quota. They're convincing themselves that they still haven't figured out the discovery roadmap and the perfect questions to ask. And in reality, I would say the majority of reps that fail here are not putting any time or thought into how to run a deal end to end, multi-threading, all of the things I just talked about here. Also, as you're getting up towards that mid-market and enterprise account executive promotions, what I would love to see from you is your ability to not only negotiate, but also frame the value of a purchase. Very simple example. If you've been in the industry for a while, you understand that purchases shouldn't be about price so much as they are ROI, but you know how to holistically portray that from the beginning of a sales cycle all the way through the entire process. You don't negotiate unless you're actually talking to a decision maker and you actually understand how to ensure that the price of this product is presented correctly. You're not just throwing it out without any context. You're not letting some like individual contributor, engineer, or someone with 2 years of experience say, hey, I'm not going to take another call unless you tell me price. You've learned that those people are not even that serious. And also, the second you start negotiating or conceding on price or anything of that nature early on in a cycle, you have now set yourself up to get destroyed by the time you actually get to the end of the cycle. So again, lots of nuances here, lots of things I talk about in other videos on the channel, but these are the types of skill sets and examples and deal stories I want to hear from you when it comes time to promote to mid-market and certainly enterprise account executive. Another big one here is territory planning, and specifically for those of you that are SMB account executives looking at that mid-market and enterprise account executive role, one of the biggest things that I see and I struggled with myself in an enterprise account executive role is not having an 80-20 approach on the highest value deals and activity. And I don't want to get too meta here, but this is again another example of how your systems need to come into play. If you are spending the same amount of time on a $20,000 deal as you are on a $750,000 deal, you are fundamentally doing something wrong. But I see a lot of enterprise account executives that get to that role, and the first year they really struggle because they want to close anything and everything. They're really nervous about the first time they've ever had $1 million plus quota, and now they're doing anything and everything. They're grinding it out. They're working 14 hours a day, not realizing that one, that 20K deal at the end of the day is not a huge deal. I'm not saying don't go after it, but two, if you actually really sat down and planned it, leveraged automation, leveraged AI, just were smarter about how you led those smaller deals, you could probably get the same result with about a quarter of the effort. And that remaining time is much better spent on your high value deals. And again, territory planning, I want to see some nuance, not just that you can organize your accounts, but you actually are not organizing them because, oh, AT&T's in your territory, Samsung's in your territory, NVIDIA's in your territory. Wouldn't it be great to break into those? No, your territory and account planning is much more realistic, much more based on why a company would actually buy. And this could be many different metrics or publicly available signals on the internet, but you're not just coming to me and saying, hey, yeah, I want to go after NVIDIA and Verizon because we're a great company and we need to be playing with the big boys. Like, no, that's like garbage. And again, we all got to start somewhere. But by the time you're becoming an enterprise account executive, I want to see some nuance. Why, whether it's like an earnings report or some type of public signal or some type of announcement or fundraising, if you're selling to the mid-market to like unicorn startups that aren't public, can you find consistent themes that actually make it meaningful to have conversations with companies in your territory, not just the cool, sexy logos that sound nice at your QBR? And lastly, more on the day-to-day, your account plan actually means something. It's not something that you make every 6 months because you now have to present to your leadership. It's something that at a minimum, you just touch and update at least once a month. And before we look at the skills that really make an enterprise account executive shine, really get you to that place where you're earning 200, 300K plus, I just want to make a note about job hopping as promised earlier, because this is such a common thing that I see that quite frankly ruins people's sales careers that otherwise were going well. One of the most common things I see is as you get 1 to 3 years in, especially if you have a track record of success, and especially if you've promoted from SDR to account executive within the same organization, or you're just coming up on a year of experience as an SDR, you will get so many companies, some of them legitimate, some of them total dog shit, that reach out to you and promise you like a 50 to 100% pay increase. In so many cases, for those of you especially that are 1 to 3 years in, these offers are often garbage, especially if they are from unproven startups. I'm not saying don't take the conversation. I'm not saying in all cases you should turn it down, but I see so many people that are SDRs that make 80K, that are blowing it out of the water. Their first year as an SDR, they're hitting 150% of their number. They're going to clock 100K. And some no-name company comes in and says, hey, we do things different. We pay our SDRs 140K a year. And you think, awesome. And you go to that job, and not only do you start the clock completely over, but you get there and you find that no one is even hitting their number, or they were when you got hired, but they just doubled their SDR headcount, and now no one is hitting because they've split the territory in a bunch of different directions. I digress, but I just want to say more often than not, early in your career, I see way too many people job hopping too soon as opposed to staying in situations they should not be in. The grass always looks greener. In some cases, it is, but especially if you're early on in your career, that early change, every single change, not only resets your progression, but if that change does not go well, and now you've spent a year as an SDR here, a year as an SDR there, then you go to a third company that finally gives you a chance as an account executive, and that doesn't work out, it's really, really hard to continue to progress. There are always exceptions. You can always reach out to me in the comments, but that, if nothing else, I just want to reiterate for those of you that made it that far, that is the number one thing I see of people getting their careers derailed, is just job hopping too soon, when had they waited it for 4 to 6 more months at their current company, which feels like a lifetime if you've only been in sales for 8 months. But in reality, it is not that long in the grand scheme of a career. So many people would be better off if they waited that extra 4 to 6 months to get promoted internally, see how it goes the first year as an AE there, and then only at that point consider a job hop. Rule of thumb, in my opinion, is anytime you make a job change, you should hopefully be planning to be there for 2+ years. I mentioned some of these already in the previous slide, but I just want to reiterate some of the hidden costs and things that I've seen that have completely derailed careers. It resets the clock internally. And while you had a lot of momentum in year one to be an SDR, now you've been an SDR for 2 years and maybe you're making 10K more this year than last year, but now you're just tired of being an SDR and you could have been an account executive if you stayed at your original company. Again, OTE does not mean dollars in hand. Just because dogshit.ai is promising you 150K salary with 90K base does not mean you're going to get anywhere close to 150K. Also, again, job hopping, like I mentioned, can raise red flags with employers. In many cases, again, it is just worth waiting, and you are right on the cusp of getting a very strong promotion and life-changing opportunity from, call it 75K to 140K or 160K at some companies I've seen as an SMB account executive. In many, many more cases, if you are at a great company already, it is worth waiting it out. And again, multiple SDR roles and then an external promotion. You're year one SDR here, year two SDR there, year three, now you're an AE at a new company. Man, that better go well, or you're going to be in a world of hurt trying to get yet another job. Just some baseline questions to assess job hopping. I know I've kind of painted the worst case scenario here. I don't want to hate on it all the way, but this is honestly something that I see in a lot of young people that I would really press you if you're thinking about a job change. How are you performing relative to your peers? If you are not in the top 10 to 20% of, performing, maybe you're in a bad situation and that's a different conversation entirely, but I strongly doubt it. And two, if you are not in the top 10 to 20% of performers, why do you think it's going to be any better anywhere else you go? The second is, have others in your role with your performance been promoted? So let's say you are crushing quota. You are at 150% quota. Was anyone before you promoted from SDR to account executive that had that kind of performance? How long did it take for them? Have you networked with them? Could you have a chat with them? Could you work with your manager to work backwards and say, hey, I saw Sarah get promoted with the same performance. Can we figure out a plan to get me to that place, assuming I continue to perform? Also, so many people early on in your career, especially, focus on the upside of what a job change could be. I could make 150K. I could make 200K if I make this job change. However, what about if you don't go? Not only do you not make 150K, not only do you barely make more than your base salary, but in reality, you probably make it 6 months and that company has layoffs and now you got to start over all over again. That's a worst case scenario. But my point being is so many reps focus on the upside. They don't even think about the downside or really role play what that worst case scenario would be. And then fourth, and one thing, honestly, I don't know, a lot of coaches out there would be afraid to say this to your face. I don't really care at this point if you made it this far in the video. A lot of people are like, oh, I've been working hard, blah, blah, blah. And you've been working 4 to 6 hours a day and you go for a jog and you take a 2-hour smoothie break at lunch. If you have truly been working as hard as you possibly can to succeed in this role, no one else is succeeding, or, there's maybe 1 or 2 more people at your level and they're also not getting promotion opportunities. Maybe it's time to assess if you should job hop at that point. But I need you to really honestly have a conversation with yourself and ask yourself if you have truly worked as hard as you possibly can. And then, and only then, if you're not getting results, can you then start to look elsewhere? And just some common thoughts on, hey, when maybe it's a fair conversation to have that it is time to leave. Ideally, you've made it 1 year, hopefully at least 2. You've exceeded quota for several quarters, not months, not weeks, several quarters, and ideally years in a row. And you're performing at the top of the leaderboard during that time. I get it. It's one thing if you've hit 120% of your number, but if you're working at a company that's really hot right now and there's dozens of SDRs in front of you that have hit 200+% of your number, what does it take to get there is maybe the first question, as opposed to, oh, this is unfair, I should leave. Not only that, but again, not just 1 month or 3 months of this, but after having several conversations with your SDR manager, with your leadership team, again, assuming you've also performed and been working hard, if there is no path to promotion, and equally important, leadership is not even willing to say, hey, we love what you're doing. We want to work with you to chart out a timeline and kind of milestones along the way to promote to account executive. If you do not have those opportunities, and you have asked several times over the course of 6 months to work with leadership to start to prepare yourself for that role and chart a path to get there, that may be a sign that it's also time to leave. But hey, let's say you've made it this far and you are finally coming in on that first 250K, 300K, 350K offer. Enterprise account executive salaries in the last year, by the way, the standard used to be 300. Honestly, I'm seeing more and more closer to 350K, which is wild. It is an awesome time to be in tech. But again, this is a 4, 5, 6 year process to get to this point. What I want to see from you is an enterprise/strategic approach to deals. We've talked about that a little bit. I'm going to get into that even more, but it's not just about, hey, I worked my ass off. I was the #1 SMBA rep. I need you to really systematically, if we think back to that SDR example of 100 calls, 5 pickups, 1 meeting, it's a much more complicated process and kind of revenue system. But if you can break that down for me as an SMB account executive, as opposed to saying, hey, I was just willing to outwork everyone, that's the kind of stuff I need to really see. Again, another thing that I want to see is especially some really great win stories around big deals, also some loss stories, and I'll get into that in a moment. But you have really strong systems in place to recognize and support and really put 80% plus of your time on the biggest deals. And you systematized some of these smaller deals, still giving them a great level of support along the way. But I know when you get to the enterprise level, you're the kind of person I can count on to not mistake activity with actual performance, actual things that are moving the needle and getting you closer to closing a deal. Again, one of the things I mentioned earlier that I want to see perfected, this is like the difference between the previous stage and now at the mastery level, is this isn't like a thing that you're starting to figure out. This is a thing with a gun to your head. You can talk about what this means for an engineer. You can talk about what that means for their manager. You can talk about with the business outcome for the director. You can talk about the business outcome for the VP. You can talk about the business outcome for the C-suite. And while they are very similar, there is nuance and differences. I cannot, as a manager, be worried about the fact that you're going to show up to your one meeting with the CTO of Verizon and talk about some low-level features. And again, these bottom 2 points that you see on the slide here kind of talk to the same thing, not only being a trusted advisor, but going back to an earlier example I mentioned at the start is quarterbacking deals. You now, as you get into the enterprise account executive role, this is a really difficult thing, but you don't have to be the front man or woman every single time. You don't have to be the person that is always on the call, always on the meeting. You need to leverage your sales engineers. You need to leverage customer success, your account managers. You need to be okay with not only using executives to meet with executives on the other account, but also being willing to not only foster that introduction, but be okay with not being on that phone call. It's very frustrating when executives don't let you join their call. However, sometimes it's a necessary step and some of the control that you've got to learn to give up and also leverage effectively as an enterprise account executive. And this is what I want to see in the interview process as well when you're going from mid-market to enterprise. It's not just, again, about the pain you uncovered, how your discovery script really uncovered that one challenging thing that led to a 200K deal. Like, that story's great, don't get me wrong, but I want to see examples of how you've equipped a champion to sell for you. You've leveraged your broader team to open a door that you otherwise would not have. Maybe your sales engineer called the CTO of the company or had a really great conversation that you weren't in the room for. As an example of others, and we're going to get into it, is leveraging marketplace deals. If you sell anything in software related to like developer tools, you may co-sell with Amazon or Google or Microsoft. Do you have stories of how you've not just directly closed a deal yourself, but you have orchestrated a deal, you've quarterbacked it, you've leveraged partners, you've done these things? These are the types of stories that I really want to see that give me confidence that you're going to be able to handle all the nuance and all of the variables of a 9 to 18 month sales cycle at the enterprise level. I mentioned partner and ecosystem selling, and I want to just dive into that further. This is a very big thing when you get to the enterprise space, specifically selling technical software-based solutions. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they all have marketplaces. And I'm just pulling this name out of a hat, but if you are selling to Chevron, Chevron probably has a contract with all of these companies on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. So sometimes it's not about actually trying to send them an invoice for your product so much as it is learning what they're using on AWS today. Who is their AWS account executive? Can you create time with that AWS account executive to then package your individual tool as a broader part of that entire sale of $100 million? These are very difficult things that take experience. And again, you can read about it, you can can watch videos like this, but also I would tell you, as you're getting into your SMB and mid-market account executive roles, you need to make a point where every time you're doing something like this, like even if it's every month or every quarter, you're documenting this so you have these stories on lock. It is not enough to know that you can go into a room and lead an effective discovery call. I need to see examples where you've navigated through the account, you've used partners and ecosystems to open doors, to sell stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I just want to see ways that times where you have to be the aggressor, you have to take the lead, and other times where you need to expand your surface area into an account by delegating, by quarterbacking this deal and orchestrating it at a more meta level. Also, this goes to executive presence and communication. Believe me, guys, I make so many videos now. I sound really polished, and sometimes that's great. And it's, speaking to an executive is not always about being super polished on the ball, but it truly is about knowing what matters to them. ROI, risk, strategy. These are many high-level examples. But again, I gave a simple example of if you're coming in there and telling them about how your email sequencing tool as part of HubSpot is doing XYZ, they're like, dude, I run a 10,000 person organization. I could really care less. I'm never going to even log into your product. So understanding that, again, that's a very basic example, but understanding when they show up to a call, getting executives to understand that you are not going to waste their time. And every time they agree to a 30-minute meeting, it's going to be insanely valuable for them. And that takes a lot of legwork. That takes a lot of communication with everyone involved at the company that's underneath that executive, so they don't feel like you're neglecting them, or just because you got the executive in the room, you're not even giving them attention. This is a very delicate balancing act you need to learn over time. But the broader point being, when you speak with an executive, it needs to be simple, easy to understand. You've done a ton of legwork before you even get to them. And it's the difference between coming in and saying, hey, what are the most important challenges to you versus, hey, we spent 3 months with your team identifying some of the key challenges. These are the top 3 I've summarized. What are your thoughts on this? How does that compare? Could you add anything from your perspective? Very similar, but different question to that executive who now believes that every time they talk to you, it's going to be worth their while, and they're not going to have to do stuff that you should have done months in advance. So as we come to a close here, guys, I just want to restate some of these things and make it very easy to digest. It's overwhelming. This is a video that if you found value so far, come back to it like once a year. You don't have to memorize this, but again, this is the kind of roadmap and conversation I wish I had when I was 28, because as I went from SDR to account executive, that happened really fast. I had a lot of early success. And then when it came to getting to the enterprise level, like I said, it was kind of this mystery box. It was like, I don't know, this rep's telling me this, this manager's telling me this, my parents are telling me this. Like, it's not a really clear thing. And the whole purpose of this, and what you'll understand as you get to higher and higher level positions in your career, is there is no exact playbook. It really is about trying to understand all of the variables at play, understanding what does and does not move the needle, and then knowing that, how do you put yourself in a position at all times to have the highest likelihood of success? If you've done athletics, if you've done anything performative, if you've been in sales long enough, you know this as well. There's nothing about sales that is a predictable machine. There are always nuances. There's always something custom with a customer you work with, and the same for your career. But that being said, if I'm to summarize here, the best way you can put yourself in that position is to early on in your career, year 0 to 2, put in the work. Just 10 to 12 hour days, Monday to Friday, a little bit on the weekends. Not so much that you just make so much money in year 1 or 2. But if you put that much time in, if you put that much learning in, you will be so much further ahead than the average person in tech sales. It really gives you the highest likelihood of excelling rather rapidly. And just a note on that I want to reemphasize is you can't watch this video and understand all of these things at detail. You can't work smarter, in my opinion, before you are first willing to work hard. You can earn working 30 to 40 hour weeks as an account executive if prior to that you've put in so much work that you understand patterns, you've systematized your work. But you just can't read a book to some extent, or just take one training program or something like that and just have it all figured out. You have to make the default assumption that you're going to have to work hard first, and then and only then can it become easier later. This is a really big one, guys. At every single stage of your career, I can't emphasize enough from my own experience, you should be very, very meticulous about who you surround yourself with. And in my opinion, getting advice from a top 10% performer who is ahead of you and or has done what you've done successfully, and you can actually verify that, one of those in your corner is more important and better, in my opinion, than having 10 people who are average around you. I can't stress that enough. It's not to say that, oh, just ignore the average performer or don't be friends with them. Like, of course, be cool. But the person you're taking advice from should be a verified top performer who has done what you want and you have actually implemented what they've told you and been successful with it. Just because someone has something to say does not mean it's meaningful. That's a broader life lesson, let alone in sales. But I just want to emphasize that again. And lastly, just say again, over time, systematizing your work, it's a vague word. It can be overused. People can use it to, for all types of good and bad reasons. But really, if you work hard, if you are getting leadership or mentorship from the right person, the right leader at the right time, it will be much easier to systematize your work and you will grow significantly because that. And in my mind, if you can't demonstrate to me by the time you're 3 to 4 years in that you've systematized your work, I don't feel confident putting you in front of our biggest customers, et cetera, et cetera. So again, guys, if you made it this far, I can definitely do a part 2. If there's certain parts of this, like the enterprise account executive side that you want me to dive deeper into or whatever it may be, definitely let me know. And if you like this, obviously we'd appreciate a subscribe to grow the channel. We make more content about tech sales than anyone in the world. But for those of you that would be interested in direct coaching from me, or you are looking for mentors who have been there, done that at companies like Datadog, like MongoDB, like AWS, HashiCorp, Vanta, PagerDuty, etc., we have communities at higherlevels.com for SDRs, notably our SDR Accelerator and our AE Mastery program as well, where we truly help account executives at every single level, both SMB and enterprise account executive, not only learn the systems, but refine their approach, really get it dialed in. And we've seen some awesome results. But nonetheless, if this video was a great help to you, we appreciate your time. Comment below if you have any questions or things I can help with in the future. And yeah, appreciate it, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks.